Coming to paperback and e-readers this April, Isis, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage as the goddess next door steps in the squared circle against the beast from the falls in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, the main event, this April. Birds of Prey and the Emancipation of Harley Quinn became the latest franchise movie that got woke and went broke at the box office. Now, your Birds of Prey and the Emancipation of Harley Quinn was expected to make $60 million by studio executives, but only opened at $35 million for the whole weekend. Now, this film struggled from its opening on Thursday, and many theaters were reported as empty, and the studio executives who have made this film are scratching their heads and wondering why, but I can easily tell you why this film failed at the box office, because when I take a critical examination of the pattern of woke movies, I clearly understand why all of these movies continue to go broke at the box office. And all you have to do is look at the way Birds of Prey was marketed, and you can clearly see why this film did not make any money at the box office. Because Birds of Prey, first of all, did not stick to the source material as related to the comic books that were created by Chuck Dixon, because the title Birds of Prey is associated with a comic book featuring Barbara Gordon, who was Oracle, and Black Canary, who was Dinah Lance, two white women, as they decided to fight crime and take on cases that Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson and Tim Drake at the time weren't able to handle. So Oracle, working out of the clock tower in Gotham City, would send out Dinah Lance, Black Canary at first, and then Huntress, and then at one point Blue Beetle and Nightwing on occasion. They would go on missions to take on cases that Batman was too busy to deal with. But we didn't get to see any of that building of that type of team in Birds of Prey. No, the focus of Birds of Prey wasn't on Barbara Gordon. No, it was on Harley Quinn, and it was on her so-called emancipation, because your Warner Brothers wanted to try to pander to the woke crowd, and they wanted to try to sell a girl power movie to the woke crowd and not the comic fans who had supported the Birds of Prey comic since the 1990s. Now, this is a second complete slap in the face to all of the Birds of Prey fans out there and the Batman fans out there, because many of the Birds of Prey and Batman fans are still hurting over that 2003 debacle of a television show, which again was another pitiful adaptation of the Birds of Prey. Now, this Birds of Prey back in 2003 was supposed to feature the Huntress, and didn't even feature her in her costume at all, and then told us lies that any Batman fan would know just do not fit the mythology of Batman. Now, according to that Birds of Prey, Batman had left Gotham City, and that just is completely out of character for the Batman character, who took an oath to defend Gotham City from all criminals. And it's sad that your Warner Brothers and DC Comics still try to push this narrative, even though it has failed 3 times. First with the original Birds of Prey in 2003, and in 2019's Batwoman, another woke television show pushing the narrative that Bruce Wayne would leave Gotham City and not have anybody there to defend it in his stead. And again, that was also met with vehement rejection from comic fans, and it was met with vehement rejection because we look at the ratings for Batwoman, and there are YouTube channels that get more views than an episode of Batwoman these days. But they want to push the woke narrative as related to strong women in the Batman lore, and this is like the 3rd or 4th attempt to push the woke initiative in the Batman lore with this Birds of Prey and the Emancipation of Harley Quinn. Now, what's really sad about this movie is you have all the elements to make a movie featuring a strong heroine. Unfortunately, your DC Comics writers are so caught up in being woke and promoting identity politics that they can't see that the source material already has all of the elements that they are looking for in the material. I mean, you have Barbara Gordon, who is a strong heroine because she is a woman who has overcome her disabilities to become a heroine once again, brokering information. You have Dinah Lance, the Black Canary, a woman who has overcome numerous tragedies in her life, like if you read Green Arrow, The Longbow Hunters, and see how she came back from all of those injuries back to being a hero again. You have the Huntress, a woman, Helena Bertinelli, who has overcome the tragedy of her family in organized crime and losing her father. All of the elements are there to tell great and compelling stories. Unfortunately, your DC decided not to look at any of that source material. No, they wanted to push the emancipation of Harley Quinn and push her so-called empowerment instead of looking at all of the great empowerment that these heroines went through in their own comic book stories. Because if you look at their comic book stories, you will see 3 strong heroines who would have made a great movie if they just focused on the source material. And again, the material was there to make a great Birds of Prey movie. You could have had Batgirl transitioning into Oracle, saying that she just was more effective in being on as a information broker, or you could have talked about her being disabled. Again, all of the elements were there to tell a great and compelling story from the source material, but instead, DC Comics and Warner Brothers wanted to get woke, and they wanted to push social justice and identity politics ahead of the storytelling. Chuck Dixon gave them great stories, but instead of them following Chuck Dixon's great stories, they wanted to go and tell a Harley Quinn story instead of looking at what was there. And the other things that people were annoyed with was the token Black Canary. You have Journey Smollett playing Black Canary in an attempt to put a black person in a white character's role. And again, that's more tokenized diversity that gives us a character in blackface and not a character who is black and telling their own story. And that was another thing that annoyed me about Birds of Prey. We get this token diversity, which is meant to, add a Black Canary, but not looking at Black Canary's rich history. I mean, Black Canary is a white woman. She has always been a white woman. And to put Journey Smollett into the role of Black Canary really was an insult, because it's not right to do that, to just give us a black character as a token to fit diversity points. We want a character who is black, who has their own story, and adds to the overall story. And again, this was one of the points that made me look at this movie, with a side eye, because I said, you're passively promoting your so-called diversity, but aggressively you're not allowing any black characters to come into the story. And you had Luke Fox, who was Batwing. You could have used him as a side character. You could have even introduced Luke Fox as their tech guy. I mean, you could have brought characters in, but Warner Brothers, again, wanted to push this feminist narrative as related to Harley Quinn being this emancipated and empowered woman, and that practically killed all of the marketing for this movie. Now, the second thing that killed the marketing for this movie was the R rating. Now, your Warner Brothers probably thought that they were going to be able to capitalize on the Deadpool audience by having an R rating. Unfortunately, in their attempts to try to capitalize on the Deadpool audience, what they didn't understand was Deadpool was true to the source material. It had Ryan Reynolds, an A-list star, and the pictures of the costume looked just like the comic books. But when you look at Birds of Prey and the emancipation of Harley Quinn, you are not getting the superheroes that you saw in the classic 90s Birds of Prey comics. You didn't get Black Canary in her costume. You did not get Huntress in her costume. And you got a new 52 version of Harley Quinn not the classic Harley Quinn everybody grew up with. So your Warner Brothers fumbled the football by not putting any costumes in a superhero movie. And again, that kept many of the comic fans away because the comic fans, when they looked at the trailer and saw that it wasn't true to the source material and was basically a continuation of Suicide Squad, they were staying away because this film gave me shudders of Catwoman 2004, another movie that came out before the woke era, talking about female empowerment, but then gave us a film that practically crapped on a character that showed female empowerment and could have been a very compelling movie had they stayed true to the source material. But instead of staying true to the source material in 2004, what your Warner Brothers decided to do was deviate, and sadly, they still have not learned anything, as I see it, in the last, I say, about 16, 17 years since Catwoman. I mean, Catwoman flopped in 2004 by going away from the source material. Birds of Prey flopped a year before, on 2003 on the WB. And it seems like, again, they haven't learned anything about making movies featuring heroines at WB. And they'll say, oh, it's the movies featuring heroines are a problem. No, it's not movies that feature heroines that are a problem. It is your execution of concept that is the problem. And the big problem is, these days, the woke people want to talk about girl power and empowerment of women in the movie to the point where it becomes so heavy-handed and preachy that there is absolutely no story. And because there is no story, there is no reason to care. And when the story is not true to the source material, there is no reason for the comic fans to come out and support that movie, because Birds of Prey was supposed to be a comic book movie, and it was supposed to be something that would get us excited about the world of Batman, because we should have heard these characters talking about Batman, talking about how they were trying to help Batman out, or how Batman was too busy on another case, so they decided to come in and form this team. But instead of us getting that team, we got a whole bunch of woke tropes. And sadly, because this film was so woke, that's why this movie went broke at the box office. And sadly, Warner Brothers and Hollywood still haven't learned anything, because this is what I think the fifth box office failure as related to the woke formula. I mean, we've had Ghostbusters 2016, we've had Charlie's Angels, we've had Terminator, Dark Fate. I mean, we have had film after film fail at the box office, pushing this so-called woke narrative to try to get the female audience to go see these kind of movies. But it's clear to me that women just don't want to see these kinds of movies, because when these movies are produced and distributed to theaters, the women don't go see them. And with America's workforce being almost over 52% women, this clearly shows that women aren't interested in these kinds of movies. Because if you have over half of the women working in the workforce who are so-called feminist and empowered, and they're not watching these kinds of movies, then it's clear there is no audience for them. And the whole woke group need to understand there is no audience for these kinds of movies, and that the core audience for comic book and superhero movies are men. So you need to start focusing on developing really good superhero movies that target a core audience of men, because the people who were buying the Birds of Prey comic back in the 1990s were primarily men, and those men were buying those books because they wanted a great and compelling story featuring the heroines of DC Comics, something they didn't get in this woke movie, and that's the reason why this movie went broke at the box office. Now, if you want to pick up my books featuring heroines like the ISIS series and the E-Steam series and the Spinsterella trilogy, and you want to see a well-crafted story featuring heroines, you can pick up those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle formats. or you can pick up some of those books on Smashwords and the iBookstore. If you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, the Beauty Myth. Learn the beauty secrets of the goddess next door in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, the Beauty Myth at online booksellers everywhere today.